Put that in the big bag, you know.
343 unfolds to go.
Indeed.
We rise together, back to the moon and beyond.
This methane would be igniting the flare, correct?
Yikes. You good? Sure. We don't need any more of these.
Good afternoon and welcome to NSF Live, our weekly news show covering everything that happened in the past week in the world of spaceflight. I'll be your host for this afternoon. I'm Ian Atkinson, editor and reporter with NASASpaceflight. But it's not just me on the show. As always, I have two very talented co-hosts, which will be to my left and right when they pop up here on the screen. I have, let's see if I get my pointing right. We got Trevor over here. Trevor, how we doing?
Yeah, we have a lot of exciting things to talk about today, so I'm doing great.
Yeah, awesome. And we have over here Adrian Bile. Adrian, how are we doing today?
We're doing absolutely great. I really like the topics for today. I think it's going to be an amazing episode. It's going to be some fun talks and maybe even some speculation and debating.
There's going to be a lot of fun discussions. I'm actually really looking forward to today's show. We were discussing a little bit earlier. We got some very diverse topics on a wide variety of spaceflight today. We're going to be talking about some interesting developments with the New Glenn. We've seen some hardware out and about at Cape Canaveral you may or may not have seen. Falcon Heavy is getting ready to fly again. It's like the fifth or sixth time this year. That rocket has been going crazy in 2023. We have some new news on Artemis, which will probably lead to some discussions, debates, and a lot of questions from the community. And then, of course, we're going to end the show off with Starship, as always. Now, of course, you probably know the drill, but if you're new here, this is a very interactive show. We love having your questions, comments. We love seeing them in chat. But if you want us to be able to read your comments on show or questions on show, be sure to use @NASASpaceflight in chat. Tag us @NASASpaceflight with your question. That helps it pop up into background software, and it really increases your chance of being able to be seen on the show. So without further ado, we're going to jump into our first topic today. I'm going to hand this one over to you, Adrian. Blue Origin. Now, we haven't really seen that much with New Glenn. We've seen little trickles of hardware here and there. We know Pad 36 is almost, if not basically finished. There's a lot of really cool progress, but on the vehicle, we've not been seeing that much until this week. What did we see, Adrian?
We did see a very interesting development there with the blue flyover we did. We fly over the Cape from time to time, as somebody may know. And what we saw there was a first tank section of New Glenn out of nowhere. There it is. Like it's not even like it doesn't even look like a Pathfinder or maybe like a structural test. Like that has like full on decals and everything. This looks like the first stage tank section, called also referred to as the first stage mid module, which basically is the liquid oxygen and the liquid methane tank for the first stage of New Glenn. So that's like, I don't know, what, 1/3 to a half of the rocket that is just like driving by there. And Max got the shot, and it's, I mean, as a person that really likes to follow Blue's progress, this is kind of amazing. We also saw in this prototype advanced plumbing. We saw like the openings to the BE4 engines where they would be supplied with liquid oxygen and liquid methane. We also saw this, which is the landing leg of New Glenn, just chilling there in the hangar. So it looks like New Glenn Flight 1 is really coming together. We also saw some other signs. If you have not watched the flyover, please watch that, because we go over there in much more detail. But we have seen indicators of an engine section. We have seen, of course, BE4s that have been spotted before. We have seen signs of BE4 testing. So it really seems like Blue Origin is starting to really kick into gears here and starting to assemble a Blue Origin New Glenn rocket for a flight as early as next year for the Escapade mission. So it seems like it's coming together.
Yeah, and I don't know if we've discussed it on the show so far, but you mentioned the Escapade mission. That's New Glenn's first mission. Can you just give us a little bit of details about how crazy that is for a first mission of a new rocket?
Yeah, the Escapade mission is the Escape and Plasma Acceleration and Dynamics Explorers, which will be payloads going to Mars. So it's not like they're doing like, I don't know, a test mission, or it's like a block of concrete. They're doing a full-blown mission to Mars with their first thing. So the interesting thing here that since we learned, we learned recently that this will be the first flight. So the interesting thing about this is it has a transfer window, right? Mars has a window where what you need to hit. It's a certain available window. And NASA and other like parties feel apparently pretty confident that New Glenn will make it for next year. Like that's of course they're taking a risk here with New Glenn, but they wouldn't assign this to a mission with a transfer window if they don't have any belief that New Glenn might launch next year. And to be fair, we have seen a full-on first stage tank now. We have seen an engine section in one of other screenshots. We have seen a second stage engine being tested in the 2CAT building. We have seen the TE being assembled for a full-scale testing. I don't think it's a big stretch to expect a New Glenn fully assembled next year. I don't think it's a big stretch.
No, yeah, I totally agree. And I was looking up right now, the Mars transfer window for next year, it is in September, but there's a bit of wiggle room there. Probably from August to October, that transfer window is open, so they have a bit of time, but they have a target that they kind of need to hit for that mission. So if they don't have New Glenn ready to launch by really October, maybe November, if they can really stretch some performance out of it, it's not looking likely like they'll launch that mission next year, but it depends. There's still a lot to go, but there's still a lot of time left, almost about a year until it should be ready to launch. So we're gonna need to keep our eyes. Of course, we'll have our eyes in the sky with our KSC flyovers. We'll have keep our eyes out for any second stage hardware, any more first stage hardware that we see out and about, and of course, we need to keep in mind the engines, the BE4s. Those have been kind of the long lead item for the Vulcan rocket. We've seen some production issues with those, and you need to have 7 of them for each New Glenn rocket. And of course, they have contractual obligations to give them to, who's that guy on the screen? I don't know who that is. But they have contractual obligations to get ULA some engines too. So they have to really balance out between, fulfilling their customers' requirement, but also having to make their own rocket with these engines here. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting year next year to see all of this happening. Now, Adrian, go ahead, Trevor.
No, I was going to say, I think an interesting question about the engines is we know that there are some differences in the BE4 between the ones on Vulcan and the ones on New Glenn. Right, the ones on New Glenn need to be reusable and ignitable during flight. So we don't know how big of a change that is to the engine and if it's a more drastic change than that or whatnot. So just because we have Vulcan engines that are on, or BE4 engines that are on Vulcan that are expected to fly this year, that may not necessarily mean that the BE4 will be ready to support a New Glenn mission next year. I think it's expected that that will be the case, but it does seem like Ian was saying to be the long lead item at the moment.
Yeah, we're actually getting some questions in here about New Glenn's role in the Artemis program, some thoughts on SpaceX hitting the Mars transfer window next year. Luckily for all of you, we do have a lot of topics very relevant to that, so we'll hit those questions later in the show today. We're going to focus on New Glenn right for this instant here. And first question from Jerwa, a regular we see here in the show. I'm going to toss this to you, Adrian. Do we know any info on New Glenn's landing platform? We know that they've scrapped their, I forget what the name was, but named after Jeff Bezos' mother. They scrapped that ship that they were going to use. Yeah, Jacqueline. They scrapped that and they're going to go to more of like a barge system. But do we know, have we seen those landing platforms, anything like that?
I do not believe we have yet spotted anything that is like a confirmation that they would use this for landing. Yes, they have scrapped their, as Trevor said, Jacqueline, which seemed like maybe a bit of too complicated, overcomplicated version. I kind of always felt like that was kind of the paradigm change also with Blue Origin, because we had the situation that Blue seemed really slow. That has been like almost a meme in the spaceflight community. And I feel like there was a certain change about 2 to 3 years ago, where really the more you pay attention, the more you saw hardware just popping up. And that was like an interesting change. And I think that was also the kind of the time when we saw a change in the landing approach, which maybe simplified it. And yes, maybe even looked at SpaceX, what works there as well. And I saw comments about this earlier, and I don't think it's stupid to look at the market leader, what the market leader is doing successfully right now. When people are like, oh, they are copying SpaceX, good. More companies should maybe start to think about like doing what is very successful right now. If they wouldn't like at least try to go as a similar approach, I would be shocked. Like that's a good thing to do, that you at least try to look at why the market leader is successful right now.
Yeah,
And
I mean, we've seen it
ultimately,
too.
it comes down to just physics, right? Physics points you in a very clear direction, and physics is the same for all rockets. So that's when I think when a lot of people accuse like China or other companies of just copying Starship for their fully reusable rockets, my question is, well, what other design is actually feasible? I feel like, all of the physical choices leads you to a fairly specific vehicle, and I'm sure there'll be some minor changes between them, but for the most part, you know, we can break all the laws we want until it's a law of physics.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, spaceflight is really going in the direction that airlines are today. I would say airlines have maybe like a 50-year head start on that, of course, because airplanes have been in development since like the early 1910s. Rockets have really been in development since like the 40s, 50s, the 60s as we really know them. So they have a head start there. And if you look at airlines, I'm gonna maybe annoy some airliner fans here, but it's tough to pick out the difference between like a 737 and a Boeing A321. Again, they're wildly different planes, but I mean, if you look at them, they all follow kind of a similar design methodology. You have your two jet engines, your two turbofans. You have a sleek cylindrical fuselage. You have winglets, And Trevor,
Can I just point out, you said Boeing A321. I don't know airplanes, but I know that's not a Boeing aircraft.
That's an Airbus. I'm sorry. I have to manage a lot of things right now. But yeah, Airbus and Boeing planes do look quite similar. I saw your face kind of get confused, and I'm like, oh, I said something really bad. Let me see how bad chat's going. Yeah, chat's going about as I expected. My apologies.
Trust me, chat. If anybody of you would be in a situation where they talk in front of a lot of people, you say some very stupid stuff sometimes by accident. It happens.
So I'm just going to go and pretend that I'm not an aerospace engineering student who's taking a jet propulsion class right now and move on to the next question here. I really hope Dr. Hall is not watching this, or else I'm going to fail that class from that statement. Let's see, Kurt Gullicher here. Real quick question. I'm just going to kind of tie a little bit of SpaceX in here because we have the transfer window next year. I'm going to give this to you, Trevor. Do you think SpaceX will try to launch anything to Mars next year in the transfer window? And I assume that means more Starship.
I'm not sure about Falcon payloads. Falcon, very obviously at this point could launch in the window designated. Now that they're launching 140 times next year, they can easily make that. But Starship, there's absolutely no way, in my opinion, they'll be ready for a mission to Mars next year. And we'll kind of get in to this a little bit more toward the end of the show, where a NASA report came out this week about some of the things required for Artemis, and one of those big things is orbital refueling, or refilling as Elon wants it to be called. And the TLDR is SpaceX is still very far out from being able to refill a vehicle in orbit. And they have a lot of work left to do. So when you take that into account, and the fact that you need orbital refilling to send anything to Mars on top of Starship, it's definitely not going to happen next year.
Sounds good. I totally agree with that. And one last question here for New Glenn from Demian here, asking, since the first flight's booster is going to be expendable, do we think they'll install fins and possibly even landing legs on that booster? Adrian, what are your thoughts there? Do you think they're going to have a kind of reusable-ish first stage, or they're just going to completely expend it? No attempt at recovery.
I will not take anything for granted at this point in New Glenn's development, because there has been such a long time since we got really proper an update presentation on what will happen and what the exact path is. So I'm it's kind of hard to speculate, I feel like, because it could change. As well as it's kind of like speculating a Starship flight from 1 year out. It will change. We saw the attachment points for what will control I think they're called Strakes, which will provide New Glenn with cross-range capabilities. These are on the module we just saw, which would indicate they're at least attaching some hardware. Of course, that hardware might also be used for ascent, but it's like, we'll see. It points to a situation where we'll probably wait and see. I would be very surprised to not see the aero surfaces on New Glenn, because the aero surfaces, you kind of also want to simulate the situation going up. You would be... I feel like we will take that chance to go up, because otherwise you will suddenly have a very different aerodynamic profile when flying a reusable configuration. So why not test? That's the main, like, the Escapade mission, I think, is overall a $20 million launch contract. So that's like more of a, like, hey, we are giving you like a risky mission because why not? But I do not feel like this mission is, like, the main priority of this mission still will also be to test out New Glenn. So I don't think they will risk every testing opportunity just to launch Escapade.
Yeah, I would
Yeah,
be
definitely.
surprised if we didn't see something like what SpaceX is doing with Starship and what they did with Falcon 9, where they have everything on the vehicle and then just do a soft splashdown in the ocean. So now you're not risking their drone ship or anything like that, but they're still getting all of the data for a landing.
Yeah, that's exactly what they did with Falcon 9, and that's exactly what they're trying to do now with Starship on the early demo missions. I mean, we saw, unfortunately, it didn't work out the way they hoped, but on the second flight of Starship, they got, they were attempting to do a splashdown in the Gulf of Mexico with the boost back and the landing burn and stuff, and I would not be surprised to see that on the first New Glenn flight, at least it being attempted.
One final thing I want to tease about New Glenn, which might happen in the next 30 days or so, which I just want to tease because people will confuse this with the hardware that we just saw. There is also the full first stage Pathfinder and the full second stage Pathfinder, as well as the payload fairing. Right now is at the hangar at LC-36. So the expectation at this point is, with them also taking down the Mini TE, that we might see a full Pathfinder stack on the LC-36, which will probably pave the way for actual hardware. What we just saw is probably actual hardware. What is at LC-36 is more Pathfinder hardware. So that's more testing like the TE, testing the ground umbilicals, testing everything in that area before actual hardware puts up. That's actually a very, that's a common thing that happens on multiple different rockets. So just don't confuse these things. If you see a New Glenn shadow suddenly on LC-36 in 2 weeks from now, that's not the tank you just saw. That's probably another tank, which is more a Pathfinder version.
Yep. Yeah, there's quite a bit of New Glenn hardware floating around. I mean, we know for sure the Pathfinder is basically inside the horizontal integration facility. They may, if it has the hardware, they may put it on the transporter erector, bring it out to the pad, and do some just fit checks out there. But it's going to be probably a few months at best before we see any actual New Glenn hardware, flight hardware, on the launch pad. And I think that is one last question here from Asher. I'm going to toss this one last question to you, Adrian, then we're going to move right along. They're asking, where will they stack New Glenns? Where will they put these launch vehicles together?
Well, we expect at the hangar at LC-36, based on everything. That's usually, so far they have been very similar to other launch providers. They have a hangar close to launch. I expect basically initial testing of both stages to take place in the TCAT and the 2CAT. Which are the both test facilities at the campus, and then both tanks to roll out individually to LC-36 and then be integrated as a hangar. That's my initial expectation. But we will exactly see. There might also be a situation where they maybe made the full first stage and second stage and just made the payload fairing there. So we'll wait and see what exactly happens. It's the first time that we will see this process.
Yeah, I mean, like you mentioned, pre-integrating the first stage and second stage before you get to the pad, that's something SpaceX does with Falcon 9. That is an extremely common occurrence nowadays for Falcon 9. They'll integrate the first and second stage inside Hangar X and then take that kind of pre-assembled stack to the launch site to really limit what they need to do at the launch pad. So we'll be neat to see how Blue Origin approaches that. So thank you everyone for your questions on New Glenn. That's going to bring us to the end of that segment real quick. I want to go through some super chats. We've had some come in, and we want to thank everyone who supported us during the stream today. Jim Cavett here, a regular we see in chat, has gifted 1 Red Team membership to the community. So thank you, Jim, for that support. And if anyone did get that membership, be sure to thank Jim in chat. We also have a $2 super chat from Musical Wolves saying, when New Glenn test? I think they probably mean like a launchpad test, and I mean, I think it's safe to say we're probably minimum 6 months away from any launchpad testing.
I'm not 100% sure about that. We have
Really?
seen so we know there's a second stage tank floating around, and they can test the second stage individually, which is the mini TE4, and the mini TE basically has two cutouts for the D3U, the BE3U engines. So I don't know. I mean, we don't know the exact status of the 3Us, but if suddenly we create a situation where I think the first stage, yes, but I, however, could see a second stage test in less than 6 months.
Okay, sounds good. I'm looking forward to see any and all New Glenn hardware development and testing over the next few months. Musical Wolves here again with a $2 super chat, joking, is New Glenn immensely complex and very high risk? Well, compared to Starship, probably not as complex, very high risk. I'd say about on par. I mean, it's an unproven launch vehicle. We've never seen really any components of New Glenn take flight before, so I'd say it's kind of from a similar starting point that Starship was at. Any thoughts, Trevor or Adrian?
I think we'll get more into this later with one of our topics.
That is very true, actually. We have quite a bit to discuss in the next hour or so. So I think it's going to bring us to the end of this segment. Oh, actually, Jerwa just hopped in with 10 Red Team memberships that they've gifted to the community. Thank you, as always, Jerwa, for your tons and tons of support on seemingly every live stream we do. So, and everyone in the community, we hope you enjoy your memberships. And speaking of memberships, in case you're new to this and you don't know what a membership is, Adrian, do you want to kind of give us a quick overview of what all our membership perks are?
For sure. Again, our YouTube membership program is basically there to support us on the best level you can do here. The starting level is, of course, Pet Red, which will make your name highlighted in the chat. You will get custom emojis like the Raptor, like Hopper, and you also get a 4K multi-view for a major Starbase event, coming to that later. Of course, then we have our second level, which which is Red Team, by the way, but I cannot see it right now here on this graphic. But Red Team gives you also access to behind-the-scenes content, for example, like pictures. You get, for example, flyover pictures, like we had a bit earlier, and we will get you some more angles and maybe like some higher definition first, because it needs to take some time before we can produce a video. It actually takes some time here. And then we have, I think, probably the best level we have, that's my personal opinion, it's Capcom, which Capcom gives you access to our membership Discord, where you can basically hang out with everybody that is a spaceflight enthusiast. It's a moderated Discord where we make sure that everybody can have a great discussion. And I think it's an awesome place to really learn about spaceflight. I learned a lot on our membership Discord. I cannot speak for everybody else, but I learned a lot on that membership Discord because there's a lot of smart people there, including, for example, Alex, who holds the record for the most messages on our membership Discord. And then we have Launch Director and Flight Engineer, which also add your name at the end of the show, like today. There you can see an example of our 4K multi-view you get under the biggest launches we have, for example, Starship, which gives you a lot of camera angles, and also some exclusive photos for Red Team and above, like you can see there. So I think, is that about what we... there we go. That's the Discord. Lots of channels, by the way. If you really like channels, there's a lot of channels. There's like a Blue Origin channel. If you're like a Blue Origin fan, check that out, because that's quite a lot. And also, I'm just confirming, Alex on our membership Discourse has 120,000 messages.
Oh my god.
Like,
yeah, I just looked. He is Alex is like the first person, I think, in the Discord that I really started talking to. He's just always there. He's insane. Phenomenal member of the team. Alex, we love you.
Yes.
Definitely. And speaking of memberships, Jeff Rowe here has gifted 1 Red Team membership, so thank you, Jeff. We appreciate that support. And before we move on to the next segment, which is another rocket that people are eager to see fly, question from Musical Wolves here for Adrian. Are those colored Starship tiles behind you?
No, these are... Oh, well, we can just say for the gag they are, but these are just... I like lights. So as you can see, and these are nanoleaf lights. They're cool.
I mean-
and also, just to point out, that radiator is not on. It cannot turn on. That's why I have my Starship plushie on that. It's not a fire hazard. I saw that message. This radiator cannot turn on. It's literally idle. So don't worry about a fire hazard. It's fine.
I'm glad to see we won't see a fire erupt in the background, and then we'll be reduced to 2 hosts as Adrian evacuates his house.
Yeah, it's gonna be bad.
Oh boy. And moving on to topic number 2 of today's live stream, we're discussing another rocket that's coming up. We've seen some hardware on the move, but not just on the move, hardware being tested about 3.5 hours ago. So Trevor, Falcon Heavy is on the pad at 39A right now. Can you give us an overview? What's Falcon Heavy launching? It's been going crazy this year. It seems like every other month is launching. And what do we expect and not really know what to expect on this mission?
Yeah, so we've had enough of 33 Raptors, and we're back to the good old 27 Merlins, which, as a Falcon lover, always going to hit different. So yeah, as you said, this will be Falcon Heavy's already 5th launch of the year, so this is quite the high cadence for this vehicle. As it gets ready to fly the USSF-52 mission, which is currently scheduled for December 10th. It looks like we don't have an exact T0 yet, but that launch date seems to be holding. It will be launching OTV-7, which will be the X-37B. And for those who may follow the program, that's the US's mostly secret spaceplane. We don't really know what it does. It's previously launched on Falcon 9, on Atlas, so we're not really sure why it's launching on Falcon Heavy. The initial bidding for this mission was between SpaceX on the Falcon Heavy and ULA's Delta IV Heavy. SpaceX won the mission for $130 million. The flight boosters are going to be B-1064 and B-1065 as the side cores, and those will both come back and land on landing zones 1 and 2. And then B-1084 will fly for its first and only time as a center core, as it will be expended. So as I said, the vehicle is going to be the secret X-37B plane. And I think the initial question that we're all wondering is, why is that launching on Falcon Heavy? Right? That's previously launched on a Falcon 9 and Atlas, which are less powerful vehicles. And so the obvious first answer is, well, there must be going to some form of higher orbit, but unfortunately, we really don't know what orbit that is. We don't have any marine hazard zones or anything like that, which can point us to which way the vehicle is launching. It could be like some medium Earth orbit, perhaps a geostationary transfer orbit, perhaps some high inclination orbit, which if you look at the payload fairing, which the USSF tweeted about, it kind of looks like it could be a higher inclination orbit, because if this graphic is to be believed, the path of the vehicle is like coming down across the Earth, kind of. So maybe high inclination, but that's total speculation. Anyway, this morning, as Ian mentioned, as we can see on our screen, Falcon Heavy was static fired at LC-39A. So that's when SpaceX fires up all 27 of those Merlin engines and conducts a full launch rehearsal to make sure that the vehicle is nominal ahead of flight. And there you can see the beautiful roar of those 27 Merlin engines. So from this point, assuming the static fire test was nominal, the vehicle will be put back into its horizontal position and then rolled back to the hangar for payload installation. And then they'll roll it back out around a day before launch to conduct with launch activities. And as I said, that's currently scheduled for December 10th.
Very interesting. And yeah, like you mentioned, this is a strange mission. I mean, this is launched on Falcon 9. This is launched on the least powerful large fairing option on the Atlas V, the 501. So this is a relatively light payload. It's been launched to low Earth orbit before, but like you mentioned, this is a strange mission. It could be going to like a geostationary transfer, like a polar orbit or something. There's such a variety of places this little spacecraft could be going. And Phillips Turtles here in chat is asking, if the X-37B is going to a higher energy orbit, which it seems like it might be going to some, how will it return? I mean, do we know if the heat shield is even rated for beyond low Earth orbit missions?
No, we really don't know anything about this vehicle. Because it primarily is classified. It's like less classified than a lot of other USSF missions, as in we know some things about it. But for the most part, what it does up there and the specifics of the vehicle are not public information, unfortunately. However, it must be able to handle these higher energy reentries just because of the vehicle that it's being launched on. And who knows, maybe that's something that they're wanting to test is launch or re-entering from a very high energy orbit to see how this specific heat shield or whatever performs. I was going to add something else. I don't remember.
The one thing that I was thinking of a few days ago when I was considering, like, where are they sending this is maybe they could do some sort of like aerobraking, like what they've done with, orbiters around Mars or around Venus, where you skim the absolute uppermost part of the atmosphere. You get very minimal heating, but if you do, several dozen or several hundred orbits like that, you can begin to lower your orbit very slowly over time, but with very minimal heating. Maybe they can do that to get it into a low Earth orbit and then bring it back gradually from there. I don't have no idea what this little space plane is doing, and it's so confusing and kind of infuriating that it's like so close but so far. We don't know what's happening.
Yeah, and that actually reminds me of the other thing that I was going to say is we also are not entirely sure how much onboard propulsion the vehicle has. So it's possible that it'll be put into a fairly high energy orbit and then it significantly lowers its orbit ahead of reentry. And that could be done partially with aerobraking, like you were saying, or also, with onboard propulsion. And I think we've seen, because there are organizations like Celeste that track all of the payloads in orbit, and they're a phenomenal organization that provides the public with just fantastic data, by the way. But we've seen they have observed some pretty large changes in the X-37B's orbit before. So that would highlight that it probably has a decent amount of delta V capable or capabilities that it can move between some, high energy orbits or whatever.
Yeah, and you actually reminded me of two separate points now. First off, we know that the X-37B has flown with an ion engine before. I do not recall if that was a payload or if that was actually integrated as part of the vehicle or both, but we know that they have tested an ion engine on like a year-long mission on the X-37B. That may have been reinstalled. Complete speculation. But something that is more definite is that we know for sure that they have actually modified the X-37B's orbit by aerobraking. More specifically, kind of using a little bit of lift generated by the wings as it goes into the uppermost part of the atmosphere to slightly alter their orbit. So we know that they do have some experience in kind of hitting the upper parts of the atmosphere to adjust the vehicle's orbit. Maybe they can do that on a more extreme kind of case this mission. But again, we don't know if they even would need to do something like that. There's a lot of unknowns that we probably won't know until at the very best when it lands, and at the very worst until like 70 years when this is all declassified. So might be a bit of a wait.
The one other thing that I think is worth mentioning, by the way, is the side cores. So 64 will be serving as the MY core, the minus Y, and then 65 is the positive Y. And both of these boosters have previously supported USSF-44, USSF-67, EchoStar 24, and Psyche. So they've gotten quite a few launches under their belt now.
Yeah, and I mean, since they have expended I forget which 52 and 53 on the Viasat 3 mission. I think these are the only Falcon Heavy side boosters that are really in use right now. Is that correct? Or am I missing a set? Because I think that these are the two workhorses right now.
Let me pull up my spreadsheet.
But I believe, from the back of my head, I believe that's correct.
Yeah, it's correct with the caveat that normal Falcon 9s can easily be converted into Falcon Heavy side boosters. And SpaceX has over 20 Falcon 9s in their fleet, I believe, at this point. So if they really needed another pair, they wouldn't even have to necessarily produce them. They could just do some quick conversions on some of the newer Falcon 9 boosters.
Awesome. And if anyone new to the show is confused by why Trevor pulled up a spreadsheet, a lot of people at NASASpaceflight like using spreadsheets. Alex, Trevor, I mean, that's how Adrian got on board here, was making spreadsheets about Starship testing. So spreadsheets are a very common trope here. So get used to them if you don't like spreadsheets. We're a very pro Excel organization.
I mean,
and NSF powered by spreadsheets.
NSF is really powered by spreadsheets. It's so funny. Let's see. Question here from Forge Gamer. This kind of goes for a lot of the missions that Falcon Heavy's been launching recently. Trevor, why do they need a Falcon Heavy with an expendable core but recoverable boosters? Why can't you recover all 3 cores, even landing it on the barge downrange?
Yeah, that's a good question. And it really comes down to how much performance SpaceX needs from the center core. And I think since they don't have 3 drone ships, right, they're limited to only recovering either both boosters or both side boosters at landing pads and then the center core downrange, or expending the center core. Right, they can't do all 3 on drone ships since they don't have 3 drone ships at the Cape. So I suspect that it just happens to be that a lot of these missions recently have been required too much performance from the Falcon Heavy, where it doesn't make sense to attempt recovery of the center core. I know for a while it seemed like SpaceX maybe had canceled center core recovery, but I believe it was the VP of launch on Twitter had John Edwards, had tweeted that on an upcoming mission, I can't remember which one, they're going to attempt to recover all 3 boosters. So they'll recover the center core on a drone ship downrange and both side boosters on landing pads. It's unclear if they'll, how many missions they'll actually be able to recover the center core from, since it really seems like a lot of these Falcon Heavy missions require a lot of the performance of expending the center core. But at least it's back on the table, so it'd be awesome if we can at least see SpaceX recover 1 center core.
Yeah, and it's sad. Their center core recovery track has been so close, but so far, where 2 missions missed the drone ship just because of different issues. But the one mission that did land directly on the drone ship, no problem, it skidded over and fell off the drone ship because of high waves, and that was so depressing to see because they finally made it. And then they didn't. And they brought back half a booster into the port, and you can't do anything with half a booster, so very sad.
It's cursed. Really, the center core of Falcon Heavy, it's just cursed. It's I wouldn't be surprised at this point if we will never see a Falcon Heavy center core landing successfully. It just feels like straight up I don't know. Fate is just against it.
It really is.
One other thing that I think could be worth mentioning, I have not run the numbers myself, that just expending the center core and even recovering both side boosters on whether it's drone ships or even on land gives you most of the performance of a fully expendable Falcon Heavy while still getting a good chunk of it back. So I think the center core expending it is really what allows Falcon Heavy to be very powerful. So that kind of explains some of the mission profiles that we've seen. And then I think SpaceX also really doesn't want to land both side boosters on drone ships because that would make them lose out on 2 Starlink missions, which is a big deal for them.
That's a lot of money they're missing out on.
Is there also this whole situation that the recoverable or fully recoverable Falcon Heavy kind of got consumed by the performance upgrades of Falcon 9? Because there were a lot of potential missions which would have possibly been a Falcon Heavy fully reusable, but Falcon 9 just got more and more powerful, and suddenly you're in a situation where Falcon 9 could do a mission that Falcon Heavy in a reusable configuration initially would have done. So it's kind of getting eaten by its own partner vehicle.
Yeah, I mean, Falcon 9 in drone ship recovery mode can send 17.5 tons of payload into low Earth orbit. Previously, when Block 5 was kind of debuted, it can get about 15 tons into orbit. So getting an extra 2.5 tons of low Earth orbit capability payload is an incredible achievement for a vehicle like that. And if you kind of extend those performance improvements to Falcon Heavy, I think I did a rough calculation, about 72 tons to low Earth orbit fully expendable is what it could get now. It's crazy what they've been able to squeeze out of Falcon.
It could even be a little higher than 17.5 tons. Right, we've seen these most recent Starlink Group 6 missions have been launching 23 Starlink V2 mini satellites. And in documentation with the FCC, they say that each satellite mass is roughly 800 kilograms. So 800 times 23 is 18,400 kilograms. So I suspect that's a bit high. I wouldn't be surprised if SpaceX has made optimizations reducing the mass of some of the satellites or whatever. But if you go purely off of that documentation that we've seen, it could even be higher than 17.5 tons. And that's just a remarkable improvement from, like Ian was saying, the 15.6 ton original Starlink missions.
And you
Yeah, it's
and
insane.
it's kind of like the Falcon Heavy at this point is not really like, it's almost in a situation where you don't need the performance sometimes because you're bottlenecked by things like the second stage or the fairing size. I mean, we literally have missions that want a bigger fairing size because the initial Falcon fairing is just not cutting it anymore for some of these USSF missions. So it's like, it's kind of remarkable what SpaceX got out of these first stages. It's if you look at Falcon 9 when it debuted initially versus where Falcon 9 is now, it's a totally different vehicle. It's not comparable at all.
Oh, absolutely. It is like it's kind of the new benchmark of the spaceflight industry. And the thing is, it's about to be totally surpassed within about 3 to 4 years when Starship is fully online and operational. It's crazy how this vehicle that we're looking at right now, live on the launch pad in Florida, is absolutely state of the art, like almost sci-fi levels of crazy engineering. And yet it's going to look like a children's toy by the end of this decade. It's so crazy to think about how fast this company and the whole industry is moving.
Yeah, I mean the original Falcon 9 V1.0 was 9,000 kilograms to low Earth orbit, and that was expendable. So now we're looking at roughly double that in recovery when recovering both the fairings and the first stage. And then expendable, which we never see expendable Falcon 9s nowadays, is probably up to like 25 tons or so now. So it is truly remarkable what SpaceX has done with this vehicle.
I mean, and it comes down a lot to like the engines. I mean, Merlin and Raptor are incredible pieces of engineering. Even though Raptor is what, like 5 years old, really, of being like on the test stand and firing in a fully, all up configuration. It's amazing what they've been able to squeeze out of these engines, every ounce of performance, and it's going to be so much fun to watch them develop even further over the next few years. All right, moving on. We're coming up to the end of that segment. You want to say something real quick, Trevor? Or...
The one other thing that Alex pointed out in the back channel that I think is worth noting is that it's a fully recoverable Falcon Heavy is just like a little bit more performance than a expendable Falcon 9. So for this mission that's coming up, which is the Astrobotic Griffin launch, which is a 4 to 5 ton lander to the moon. Thank you, Alex, for that info. They are just in this weird spot where an expendable Falcon 9 is not enough performance, but a fully recoverable Falcon Heavy is like perfect for the launch. So it'll be exciting that there's at least one mission where we'll get to see it.
Yeah, and hopefully they do nail it there. Then boom, you basically get a free Falcon Heavy booster to use on your next mission. So you get a nice customer discount there. Let's see. Actually, I have a few questions that have poured in here. From Jerwa, they're asking, is it really... Let's see, have they really gotten that much more performance, or do they just know that they can recover with smaller margins right now? So do you know where they got this performance from, Trevor, or is it kind of just a mix of everything?
Yeah, so it's a mix of a whole bunch of things. So the first thing is we have seen some changes to flight profile. So for example, we've seen on like the crewed missions, them switch from a 3-engine entry burn to a single engine entry burn, and then from a single engine landing burn to a 3-engine landing burn. So that just reduces the amount of propellant that they need to land. Then additionally, I'm sure they have a significantly better understanding of the exact amount of propellant they need. So they can reduce the amount of Falcon 9 propellant left in the tanks once they have landed. I'm sure that's been brought down by a significant margin. Then on top of that, we've seen some optimizations during flight, like on Starlink missions, the payload fairing deploy it's like very soon after stage separation now. We've also seen them speed up the stage separation process, which is important because during that time, right, gravity is still pulling you down, but you're not counteracting it, so you end up losing some performance. We've seen they have decreased to propellant temperature more, which allows for the propellants to have higher density, and higher density means they're putting more propellant onto the vehicle. That also means that the engines are getting more propellant in the same volume, which means that they're operating at higher thrust and have more performance, meaning they counteract gravity more. So it's like just a whole bunch of these really small changes that seems to have added up to a pretty large increase in mass on Falcon 9.
I just got to mention in the back channel, Alex joked that hot staging the Falcon 9 would increase the performance even more. And I don't really know if that makes me want to throw up or if that makes me really want to see a hot staging Falcon 9. I think the jury's
I'm
out.
just gonna say like goodbye booster in advance. Like that's how I feel about this. I feel like hot staging Falcon 9 would just result in either the MVAC or the booster or both breaking.
You know, I really
like
hope
that,
that when... Go ahead, Ian.
Go ahead, Trevor. I was going to say, it's
No,
going to be
okay.
like on those Titan 2 videos from like Gemini Titan, when you see the hot stage and then the first stage just explodes.
Yeah. No, I was going to say, as Falcon 9 nears retirement, which is obviously a very, very long ways out, but I really hope we see SpaceX just kind of have fun with some of the hardware they have lying around. Like, why not try hot staging a Falcon 9 or something like that?
Let's do a 9-engine landing burn. Screw it. Oh, yeah, it's strange to imagine Falcon 9 retiring now. Like, it just feels like it's a common part of the industry. But yeah, that's pretty awesome. A few more questions here. Andrew Folks here saying, now this goes to you, Adrian. NSF store needs a line of betting called spreadsheets. And I see your excited face.
No.
And can we have just like the Starship countdown spreadsheet on like bedsheet form or like
But,
Alex's spreadsheets?
I'm just glad with this question that we finally found Sawyer's burner account. That's my only reaction to this. Like,
that's one pun token, Sawyer. We know that you're hiding. Oh, that's great. Thank you, Andrew. Let's see. And then Paul Kelly here with one last question for Falcon 9 saying, are the Starlink V2 mini missions limited by mass rather than volume? Is there anything to be said for a Falcon Heavy Starlink with all cores recovered? I mean, Trevor, it seems like they take up most of the fairing where it wouldn't really make a difference for Falcon Heavy nowadays.
I believe Starlink V2 is mass constrained, not volume constrained. I think they could stick up quite a few more satellites in the volume of the normal Falcon 9 and Falcon Heavy payload fairing. But at the end of the day, it just wouldn't really make sense to put them on Falcon Heavy. Because sure, you could, let's just say that they still wouldn't be volume constrained. They could put, let's say, on the order of 28 tons divided by 800, they could put about 35 satellites in orbit, so roughly 50% more. But you're also, for 50% more satellites, you now have to recover 3 and refurbish 3 boosters. So I don't think it would really make sense for them to do it. And of course, the counter argument could then be, well, you're only expending 1 second stage. But I suspect the math wouldn't work out, and it would be better just for them to keep doing Falcon 9 launches.
And yeah, the thing too is like a Falcon Heavy, you need to process, almost kind of 3 times the launch vehicle as Falcon 9. You need to deal with integrating 3 cores, checking out 3 cores, static firing if applicable. You need to convert the strong back to Falcon Heavy mode from Falcon 9 mode. It takes a lot of time that you could be using just to keep the strong back in Falcon 9 mode, send a Starlink or 2 from 39A, keep sending them from 40,
And another thing that SpaceX would have to take into account is the amount of pad damage after launch. After a Falcon 9 launch, at this point, there is, SpaceX has a very good understanding of what they need to replace on the pad. When with Falcon Heavy, you have 3 times as much force and thrust. So there is a significant amount more pad damage. And I wouldn't be surprised if that would significantly reduce pad turnaround time. So it'd be quicker to just launch 3 Falcon 9s back to back to back than it would be to refurbish a pad after Falcon Heavy.
Sounds about right to me. All right. I think that brings us to the end of the Falcon 9 segment here. Thank you for all the questions. That was the Falcon Heavy segment. We did a lot of kind of Falcon family overall discussions there. That was a great little segment there. Real quick, I want to thank Steve Thomas for becoming a PadRat member. Thank you very much for your support there. And Jim Cavett, again, another regular in chat, has gifted 1 Red Team membership. Thank you, as always, Jim, for all your gifts to the community. Now, moving on from here, we discussed Falcon Heavy, and I mean, Falcon Heavy is going to be used a bit in the Artemis program. It's going to be launching sometime with the Gateway modules on the extended fairing. But the Artemis program kind of got a bit of an investigation, not an investigation. This sounds kind of bad. It had just like a report done on how it's operating. So, Trevor, the NASA GAO has given some kind of depressing and pessimistic numbers and kind of thoughts on the Artemis program overall. Can you guys give us a little walkthrough on what they found about Artemis?
Yeah, so first of all, the GAO is the Government Accountability Office, and they delivered a report on the Artemis III schedule and some of the important milestones on the mission. So the first thing that we probably want to just give a quick overview is what is Artemis III, and just to remind everyone, that's when NASA is planning on landing on the moon again. So humans will launch on top of SLS in their Orion spacecraft, which is going to dock to Starship in lunar orbit, and then Starship will take them to the surface of the moon, land there, they'll do stuff, and then they'll come back to Earth. So the issues that the GAO included is the ambitious schedule for HLS, which Artemis III is scheduled to launch in 79 months. If development takes about average pace, Artemis III will happen on the order of 2027. Of the 13 key events in the HLS program, 8 have been delayed by at least 6 months, and 2 of them have been delayed to 2025. A lot of this was caused by the continuous slips to the orbital flight test, which launched late and was terminated early into the flight. And then now I'm sure HLS team is quite happy with a lot of the data they received from IFT2, but that data will still be in review. Then there are significant challenges remain, especially with life support and orbital refilling. So Axiom might need to redesign certain aspects of the spacesuit, which could delay its delivery for the mission. And then they're also trying to leverage a lot of NASA's prior work to develop these more modern spacesuits. So I think the two items that we really need to watch out for Artemis III to happen is for the spacesuits to be developed for doing activities on the lunar surface. And then we also need to keep an eye out on SpaceX's test of orbital refilling. And the GAO's report indicated that SpaceX is kind of behind on this, and they haven't made a ton of progress, which is a problem since the most recent report suggests that it's going to be in the teens of refills needed to get HLS Starship into lunar orbit, and for that to get from lunar orbit to the surface of the moon. So that's going to probably be the long lead item, which is definitely kind of goes against what SpaceX has been saying.
Yeesh. I think that's a kind of one word to summarize this entire report is yeesh. Yeah, there's a lot of kind of depressing information in there, but a lot of kind of eye-opening information at the same time. Adrian, your hand is raised. What is your thoughts on this? Or what are your thoughts?
Before anybody says the GAO might be biased or might have an agenda here, I really want to point out that the GAO in the past has been known to really trash SLS if it was late. Like, they were never shy to call out SLS for any slips. They were never shy to point that out. Usually they put the finger where it hurts, kind of. And, I mean, the first thing I want to point out is, let's be real, I think nobody of us expected a moon landing in 2025. Like, that's, at least like at an NSF, I feel like if I ask any NSF reporter at any point in the last few months, nobody would have said like, yeah, 2025, that's going to happen. So this is like expected, I would say. And it also really puts more into perspective what we are talking about right now. I think 2020, even 2027 sounds still ambitious because HLS is, HLS is not really figured out yet. Like, they're still in a very early phase with Starship. They have to figure out orbital refueling. They have to figure out the whole lander itself. They have to fly this demo mission they talked about earlier, and then we are really there. And that's like these are non-trivial things. These are very complicated steps, like especially orbital refueling. We talked about it before the show. Orbital refueling gets trivialized a lot, but we all know from Starship, we all know from SLS how hard it is to refuel a rocket. To fuel a rocket itself. It's so often a cause for scraps. And now imagine doing that remote in space while having thermal issues.
Yeah. And not to kind of like toot my own horn here, but like for my degree right now, what I'm working on is a capstone project, and we're studying Starship and the kind of effects of taking a Starship to the moon. And it is extremely complicated, not even considering boil off. Like you mentioned thermal constraints. Without even putting boil off in there, this is an incredible problem that you need to solve. Starship is really not going beyond geostationary transfer orbit without refueling. Like that is something that you need to get done. And Trevor, I saw you smile there. Was that just something you read in the back channel, or do you have a comment?
No, I just saw Chris B's poll in chat for the biggest party pooper.
There should be like a fifth option, like physics.
I would argue that the GAO is kind of like, they are there to be party poopers, right? They are there to bring down the hype. It's literally like they show accountability, and like they show where everything is really. And I feel like it's kind of their job to be party poopers.
It's a tough job, but yeah, GAO knows how NASA schedules can be overly optimistic. They've done this for Artemis, they've done this for SLS, they've done this for the exploration upper stage, for the Veritas mission to Venus, for the Psyche mission. They've done so many reports and investigations into missions. They know how this structure of organization works. And so when they say something like this, you should pay attention, because they've seen this before. They know what's going to happen. And if you don't listen to them, you're going to kind of fall into a trap. It's not trivial.
Yeah, ask them about their opinion about Mobile Launcher 1 and 2. Like that's another fun topic. They had some, let's say, fun opinions in the past about.
Yeah, the Mobile Launcher 2 is a story in and of itself. That might be the long lead item for Artemis 4. But right now we're looking at Artemis 3, and yeah, they need to just keep pushing through with HLS. You can't beat physics. I mean, Trevor said it time and time again. When you're up against physics, you're not going to win. So you need to lose as little as you can. And that's kind of what you need to do here in a scenario like this. And again, it sucks to hear all of this, and chat's kind of going understandably, like it sucks to hear this. But yeah, that's kind of how it be. Any other thoughts here before we kind of move on to another segment? I see we don't really have any questions in queue for this portion. I think everyone's kind of just taken the news.
Yeah, I think one thing that's important to remember is, even though it's very clear that the United States landing on the moon again is going to be delayed, like Adrian was just saying, no one thinks it's going to happen in 2025. The really exciting news is that once HLS is working, we will have a substantially more reliable way to go to the moon. Starship will be reusable and will be able to take 150 tons to the surface of the moon. So this will give us just unprecedented capabilities that the Apollo program never gave us. So while it sucks that it's not going to be as soon as we want it to be, it's going to be way, way more future-proof than the Apollo program was. And once SpaceX is done with HLS, they can start working on sending humans to the surface of the moon above Starship and Super Heavy, and not even needing SLS. So it's very exciting times that we're going into.
Yeah, it's really like refueling is a really tall brick wall that we're approaching. You're going to hit that wall whether you like it or not. Are you going to stop there, or are you going to try to get up and over the wall? I mean, we've seen Super Heavy and Starship can leave the ground. They can hot stage. You can ignite all 6 Raptor engines on the upper stage and make it almost to your intended trajectory. We figured that out within 2 flights. We're starting to get to the point where they're understanding, okay, we can begin to recover the Super Heavy booster. We could do a boost back burn that doesn't quite finish, but we can reignite those engines. We're seeing milestones here as we get up close to that brick wall, but eventually we're going to hit that brick wall, and it's probably going to take a few flights to figure it out, and definitely a few years before we hit that point.
And also, just another thing, GAO report, just as a finishing thought here, maybe they also, from the moment it was assigned, basically say the whole HLS schedule was incredibly ambitious, because they point out again, from assignment to initial launch date, it was 79 months. That is 13 months shorter than the average NASA project duration from assignment to launch. So basically, they assigned one of the most complex things humanity has tried to achieve since a few decades to do in a shorter period of time than usual. And that comes also down to the fact that NASA, ESA, JAXA, and other agencies have in the last few years called for more funding for these kind of projects. And they just didn't have the funding. They just didn't have the energy to move ahead with this earlier and faster. So in the end, NASA also needs to look out, like, do we have the funding for HLS? Do we have the funding for an SLS? Do we have the funding for a gateway? And these are the kind of problems that occur when you start to budget you from year to year and be like, no, we have to do this project in this year. And then you're like, okay, now we can do this in this year. But then that project is already kind of late. And then you need even more money to fix it in time. So it's really all coming down to the fact that NASA, ESA, and others have begged for more money. And, well, now we see the results.
And I looked up the Apollo lunar module for comparison. The contract for the Apollo lunar module was awarded to Grumman, which is now Northrop Grumman, back in 1962. The lunar module did not leave Earth until 1968 for the first time. So that is 6 years. Now, that is a bit apples to oranges comparison, because Starship was in development still before HLS was awarded. But I mean, you can kind of look at that to say it's going to take a long time to get a lunar module designed and flying, even for like the very first test mission of that lunar module. So yeah, this is no really easy task that NASA and SpaceX are undertaking here. Let's see, what else do we got here? Arianespace here is asking, just in general, so why is NASA going to the moon again with Artemis? Is it any proper reason or just for science and exploration? And I think there's a lot of reasons. Adrian, just can you kind of summarize the reasoning of the Artemis program? I know it's kind of a big ask, but...
I mean, the overall goal from the Artemis program right now is to go to the moon and eventually to Mars. And I feel like the overall logic, even if you agree with it or not, it's another point, but the overall logic is everything they want to do on Mars, they need to be able to do on the moon. So the Artemis program has the ambition to establish a capability of humans to go to the moon in a more, how to say this, in a way that is more supporting of future flights than, for example, Apollo, and basically demonstrate the capability to go to Mars and beyond. So it's just, maybe it's the next logical step for spaceflight, I guess, because all of these steps were already talked about when Apollo happened, but they just never happened. So this is the ambition to make a more sustainable program and eventually go to Mars and beyond. That's why they want to go there.
Very good summary there. Thank you, Adrian. I think that we have. I think that brings us to kind of the end of our our segment here. Flawed perspective here, kind of correcting me a little bit. And yeah, there were some material science issues with the LEM that the HLS does not see. So yeah, like I said, it's kind of an apples to oranges comparison, but just to give us kind of a historical perspective, that's what I was kind of going for there. In our support queue, we've had some amazing support come through in the past few minutes. First off, a $50 super chat from David Graper. Thank you very much, David. We really appreciate that support. That goes a long way. They're saying, keep up the good work on the live chats. And they did a little spell correction here with another $5 super chat saying, continued good work on the live chats, spell checking themselves. So thank you, David, for the support and for the spell check there. We really appreciate that. Bob Fillmore has gifted 5 Red Team memberships, and Blake Alexander has also gifted Red Team memberships. Thank you to the two of you, and we hope that everyone who has gifted memberships enjoys all the perks that come alongside them. So we were talking about Artemis, we're talking about HLS, we're talking about Starship. I think that brings us to the final segment of today's show, and kind of the the one we come back to every week, is Starship in and of itself. So we've seen Flight 2 would happened a few weeks ago. We're getting ready for Flight 3 of Starship right now, getting Booster 10 ready, getting Ship 28 ready. We think that they're the pairing. We haven't had any official confirmation on that, but that's kind of the way that things seem to be going. We also had some work going on the orbital tank farm. We have some new tanks coming in for methane. Adrian, you got to give us what's been happening with Starship, even though I summarized a lot of it just now.
For sure, I can do that. But before that, I want to quickly point out something, a service announcement here, because maybe some people have noticed that at the end of, I think, Monday, basically we removed our Christmas collection from the store because we don't want to create disappointment when people order them and they wouldn't arrive before Christmas, because that was basically the cutoff point for that. Well, there was some feedback about that in the comments that people didn't care about that and they still wanted to order them. So I want to make sure that everybody knows that at this point in the store, if you go to the top of the store and you go to collections, the Christmas merch is back for order if you want to get them. I want to point out, again, this will not arrive in time before Christmas. That's why this beautiful red banner is there that really makes that clear. This will not be arriving before Christmas. But if you still want something cozy, something warm for the winter, because, well, after Christmas, there's still winter, right? Especially if you're living in an area like me where it goes to like -10, -15 sometimes. You want to have something cozy. So you still can have something cozy. It's maybe not Christmas, but it's still keeping you warm. So go to shop.nasaspaceflight.com, go to the collections tab, and there you see the holiday 2023 merch, which is back, not delivering before Christmas. However, I want to point out at the bottom, you see some more of our evergreen, normal retailer kind of products, which are shirts and mugs. These will arrive before Christmas if you order them today. Just to point it out, these are more like shirts and a mug, that these would arrive in time. And that's it. And yes, they would arrive before Christmas 2024, because I see that question. They would arrive before Christmas next year. They would not arrive for Christmas 2023. There we go. Also, I read a sweater right now, in case you didn't notice, and it's really comfy. I really like them. They're actually knitted, and they're super comfortable.
Good job, Adrian. You did well with those.
Thank you.
But anyway, moving back on before I totally missed those pings in the back channel for the store plug. Moving on to Starship, our kind of next topic here. Adrian, what have we been seeing over the past week with Starship? Getting ready for Flight 3, whenever that will be.
Well, we saw, for example, some increased activity on Ship 28, which still was lacking some work on the TPS, the Terminal Protection System, which apparently has started again. They have started to, since it's now back in the bay, basically start to work on that, because we expect this to be finished before this ship will roll out for final engine testing. Friendly reminder, for both Booster 11 and Ship 28, the next test we expect is probably engine testing. They have both done a cryo campaign. They have both done basically the steps leading up to that. So we are at this point kind of waiting them to get engines roll out. On the booster side, we have also seen promising signals, because the booster stab pins, basically the stabilizer pins on the pad, were reinstalled. These pins are there to guide the booster down as it basically gets set onto the orbital launch mount. So we are right now in a situation where we see signs for both booster. Did I say booster 11? Booster 10. I'm sorry. Booster 10. Where they get basically ready for both test campaigns. Of course, the booster would be tested on the orbital launch mount, which kind of survived the last flight, which was surprising to some of us, including me. And the ship would, of course, go to the suborbital stance and complete its test campaign there. Now to some other news that might delay this. There's still work ongoing on the orbital tank farm. The existing subcoolers that were placed before Launch 2 but not hooked up are now being hooked up, so they are kind of increasing the capability of the tank farm. They are also delivering new ground tanks. We expect up to 9 new tanks being placed on the orbital tank farm, and kind of like as an expansion of that. Right now, the label I believe says nitrogen, but there might be a situation where these might, instead of nitrogen, be oxygen, based on what they might be needed for. But we see some modification on the tank farm as well going on. And as long as, of course, your tank farm is not hooked up, you can kind of not test your booster. Because you need the orbital tank farm to test the booster. After all, it needs fuel. So that might be something that is happening very soon. But yeah, promising steps. Again, we might just be, going down the steps, it might just be Ship 28 and Booster 10 engine testing, closing the tank farm, including the upgrades, then full stack, then wet rest rehearsal, and then, of course, we also need the license modification and safety report. And that's the steps. Like, it's not that long of a list.
Not that long of a list, but it's not necessarily a short timeline to get those accomplished. Let's see, we got some questions coming in here, of course, on the Starship segment. Flawed Perspective here is asking, when do we think hot fire tests are going to be starting on Flight 3 components? So, of course, we have not seen engine testing on either Ship 28 or Booster 10 yet. Any estimates? Trevor, Adrian, you're up and above now. Any estimates on when we might see engine testing commence on those? I assume we think that Ship 28 is going to happen first. What do you guys think?
Yeah, so generally ship testing starts before booster testing just because they're done sooner, and also, there's no work that really needs to be done on the suborbital launch side. So I would say ship, in the next 2-3 weeks, like definitely before Christmas, I think we'll probably see a static fire of a ship. Booster, I'm not as confident on. I think a lot of that will depend on what retrofits does SpaceX want to make following the data they gathered from their second orbital flight test. I could definitely see a static fire before Christmas in the last few weeks of this year, but I think it's probably more likely going to be early next year.
Sounds good. Adrian, any thoughts?
Yeah, I don't think this will be. I think booster might be a bit later than Trevor expects, but overall, I think Ship 28, like maybe before the end of the year. I think that's my prediction. Like, it's kind of like whenever, because the suborbital tank farm is not really a factor, so is ship readiness. I don't think that's like any critical path. That will probably just happen when they have time at the orbital launch site and maybe need some concrete to cure or whatever. Booster 10, I think that's more they want to test the whole new tank farm first, and they want to bring that through the paces. I would not. I think we will see a booster on the pad before the end of the year. However, I think static fire testing will move to like mid-January. That's my prediction, and then we will have like full flight readiness, including a full stack, by like late January, early February. That's my current prediction based on what we have seen.
And I will say that I do agree with that as the tiebreaker. I side with Adrian. I was about to say early to mid-December when I forgot that we are in early December right now. I thought we were in like mid-November. My timeline is like crashing in around me, and I'm having a bit of an existential crisis. But I do think by the end of this month we might see Ship 28 on the pad, maybe doing a static fire or two before the end of this month, but it'll be close. And yeah, as you can see here on the left side of the screen, there's a lot of work happening on the orbital launch mount. We've seen the tank farm is having a lot of expansions going on right now, so that's going to take up some time that they cannot do testing on the pad for. You can see there are some tanks being moved into place. We don't know if those are trying to be done before Flight 3. If I had to guess, probably, but again, we don't know any exact timelines here for the orbital tank farm upgrades. So it's going to be an interesting next month or two as we kind of get a bit more of an idea when Flight 3 is going to happen. It's, in my opinion, I'm thinking more of like an early March as a net date for Flight 3, but again, that depends on a lot of things on both the hardware and regulation side, so we're going to stick around and wait and see. Now, let's see. Arianespace here. This is another question, another discussion we've been seeing a lot in the spaceflight community. Starship V2. That just came up out of nowhere. Elon tweeted that the early 30s of Starship, so 30, 31, 32, 33, are the last of V1 Starship. Trevor, what do we know about Starship V2? I assume not that much.
Yeah, sadly, not a lot. So on that tweet, Elon just mentioned that they will hold more propellant, reduces dry mass, and improves reliability, uh, which is kind of not the most specific tweet he's ever made. Um, so I think we can speculate a little bit more on this. So for his first point of holds more propellant, I think we can. It's hard. It's somewhat unclear what he means by this because it could mean that they're like switching to elliptical domes or something, which allows them to just get a little bit more propellant, or more likely, they extend the ship by like 3 rings or so, allowing more tanks for the propellant. So then the next point is if you assume that the ship is actually going to be getting longer, how could the dry mass be reduced? And I think what he probably means is that the percent dry mass compared to, or the ratio of dry mass to wet mass is going to be reduced. So even though they're going to add more dry mass, the total percentage of the vehicle's mass will end up being more or lower percentage dry mass. But that's also kind of speculation on our part. And then finally, what does improved reliability mean? I'm sure that's a lot of just taking in the lessons that they learned from the first 2 orbital flight tests, but again, nothing actually specific. So right now, we have absolutely no idea what Starship V2 is. We can also guess there are probably going to be some flap changes. Maybe it will have the 6 Raptor vacuum engines that Elon has talked about for literally years now. But we just sadly don't know.
Yeah, there's a lot, like you mentioned, the fin upgrades, the 6 Raptor vacuum engines. There's been a lot of kind of teasing from Elon about potential upgrades for Starship that may happen, may not happen. We don't know when they'll happen. And yet, like you said, unfortunately, we don't really have much information on what this V2 is. Is this going to be like just a small block upgrade, or is this going to be a revolutionary, completely different looking Starship in one way or the other? I don't really know what we're going to see yet. I kind of feel like this will be more of a block upgrade since we haven't seen any like revolutionary hardware or anything happening. But yeah, we'll just see what Ship 35 looks like when that comes down the road eventually. Also, very cool looking sign that they built there at the launch site, Gateway to Mars. I've seen a lot of discussion as to whether or not Boca Chica will ever launch a mission to Mars. That's a bit more up in the air, but that's probably about a decade away or so from now, but it's a very cool looking sign, I will say. Let's see, we do have some more questions here in chat. The name's Dave here is asking, is there another hot stage ring ready? Adrian, have we seen any more rings going around for booster 10 or 11, or are we kind of waiting to see what happens there?
Good question. I do not believe we have seen a designated hot staging ring for booster 10 yet. If I totally don't screw this up right now, but I do not believe there's like already apparently there's a test article in the plot site right there in the middle. Okay. To be fair, there's multiple. There's also the test article. There's other potential, but I'm not fully sure. Like, I don't think we have seen a dedicated B10 hot staging ring. So
yeah, and those are thought to be made in Star Factory. So we can't really see them being produced anyway.
I do recall seeing Go ahead, Adrian.
Yeah, I think basically at some point we will just see them rolling out a basically complete hot staging ring. That's how it's gonna that's the new reality in Starbase with Star Factory now. They will just roll out complete sections, roll them out into the high base and mega base, and stack them there. That's your situation now with Star Factory. So we don't get any good dome flips and anything anymore. So there we go.
Yeah, unfortunately, we don't have any windows in Star Factory either, so we are quite literally in the blind here, and we don't really know what to expect anymore. Everything's up in the air with Starship. I do recall seeing 1 or 2 hot stage rings moving around the site a few weeks ago in one of our flyovers. They may have just been test articles. They may have been scrap pieces. We don't really know. We're going to have to wait and see on that end. I mean, Booster 9's hot stage ring was added pretty late into its career, so it's not really surprising that we haven't seen one yet so far. Gonna move into some super
given
chats
that
that
we're
we.
probably on the order of 3 months out from flight, probably a bit more than that. They can do basically all of the testing with booster and ship without it, and then they can just add it to the final stack as they get ready for wet dress rehearsal.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, there's still quite a bit of time to get it rolled out to the pad. The pad's not ready to accept the booster yet. I mean, the booster, does it even have engines yet? Have we seen engine installation or anything? That's going to be the next
Yeah,
big step for the booster.
booster has engines.
Roger, copy that. It's tough to keep keep track of everything happening down at Starbase here. I think it's going to bring us to the end of that segment, though, unless you two have above and below me any other comments on this.
I'm really curious right now because it seems like they are wrapping up this pre-Star Factory segment of Starship and like the production leading up until that point. So I'm really curious how like there might be a bigger hardware gap at some point that just appears because there might be moving some gear there, might be moving some operations there. So I think we will at some point just see suddenly them stop stacking vehicles on a weekly basis, basically. So yeah, that's gonna be interesting to see. And there's also, of course, they want to have Star Factory, so there has to be some advantages. Maybe we'll even see quality differences. That's the main thing I'm really curious about. Like, will we see something on the vehicles that indicates this has now been built inside of a closed room instead of, well, in a tent? So really interesting part for me. But of course, I wish the groove and the walls of Star Factory were glass. That would have been a bit better, I think, for me.
Yeah, it's going to be really neat to see. I mean, we've seen the production kind of being paused on the ships and boosters, so it's going to be a bit of a transition period as they ramp the factory up, begin to produce V2, which again, whatever that ends up being, and it's going to be a turbulent next few months down in Starbase, which is very interesting. Now, actually, we are going to have a bit of a special premiere and a special video coming up at the end of this show. We have a video all about saving Hubble, the 30th anniversary of STS-61, the first servicing mission of Hubble, where, as you can see here, the question was really asked, can Hubble be saved? The optics were way out of line. Everything was blurry. They were getting awful pictures back from Hubble. It was very close to being considered abandoned. So the question was, can we even attempt to save Hubble? And spoiler alert, you might know the answer. But this video is going to kind of take you everywhere from the launch all the way up to what's happening today with Hubble. We've seen some issues happening with Hubble. Right now, as I'm speaking, Hubble is actively in safe mode. We're seeing issues with its gyroscopes, and we're beginning to question, can we fix it again today? Can Hubble be serviced by a vehicle that is not the space shuttle? So there's a lot of big questions happening. This video is going to kind of cover all of that. And yeah, it's going to be very interesting next few years for the Hubble Space Telescope as we hopefully await Polaris 2 coming online. And again, we're going to cover all that and more in this Hubble video discussing the history and future of the first large space telescope that was ever launched. But before that happens, we're going to be going through some quick little support that we have here. That's going to be happening at 4:30 Eastern Time, so right at the end of the show. So I'd like to thank, first off, Musical Wolves with a $2 super chat saying, and I agree, the Gateway to Mars sign is very cool. Flawed Perspective with a $5 Canadian super chat saying, contribution to the Existential Crisis Fund. Thank you, Flawed Perspective. I appreciate that support there. I see Adrian shaking his head. Nicholas here with a Storm message saying, happy birthday, Ali. Well, I see someone's going to be getting a very nice birthday present. Happy birthday, Ali. Also, watch out, Adrian. Got a little merch pie coming up there. Oh, God. Max E with a $2 super chat. I wonder who this is saying, when Stubby ship. I'm going to pretend I did not see that and move right along. I don't even know. What would a Stubby ship even be?
I don't know. We love you, Max, but then you say things like that.
And it makes it hard to love you. Anyway. No, I'm just kidding. We love you, Max. You're amazing. Bideford here with a $20 super chat saying, sign needs the SpaceX logo on it to truly be complete. I mean, I think it gets the point across. Gateway to Mars. You don't really need a SpaceX logo on there to kind of seal the deal there. So yeah, thank you everyone for the support that you've given to the show, for super chatting, giving memberships, becoming a member, even just hitting the like button. We talk about it a bit, click the like button. It makes the stream do better, the YouTube algorithm happy. But it really does make a difference, and we appreciate any and all support that we've seen on this live stream here. Also like to thank everyone for sending in their questions. We had some great questions, some great discussions here today. Again, I said at the beginning of the show, and it turned out to be true, we had some great discussions during this episode here. And see Max also terrorizing the back channel with some stubby ship propaganda.
Not everything needs to be stubby, Max. Like, it's there's totally no stop.
Was Falcon 9 V1.0 the stubby Falcon 9?
I mean, it was worse, so I think that moves. That's about the trend for stubby things so far. So it was the worst Falcon line, so it's also like the stubby, probably, yes.
I don't like this
the good thing is, Max, I'm on air here, Max. You're not, so I can say these things, and you don't have a voice in this right now, Max. So that's my power.
Thank you, Max, for always terrorizing everything. And same to Jack. Jack also terrorizes us a good bit. But I think it's going to bring us to the end of the show here. I'd like to thank my two very talented co-hosts. I don't know who I have on which side here. Trevor, Adrian. That's you, Adrian. Thank you for joining me, Adrian Bile. How are you? Thank you for hopping on the show with us here. I can't get my words.
Thanks for having me. It was a pleasure, and I really enjoyed our conversation today.
Awesome. And wrong side. Thank you, Trevor. Thank you for joining us today on the show, as always, with your Falcon 9 expertise.
Yeah, of course. I love Falcon 9. I'm always going to say that it's way better than Starship. So getting to talk about it with y'all for, 20 minutes was awesome. So thanks everyone for tuning in.
Yeah, absolutely. It was some very fun conversations here. I was your host for today, Ian Atkinson, reporter with NSF. Also, thank you to our producers, Jay Keegan and Kevin Michael Reed, for pushing the buttons, pulling the levers, and keeping this stream afloat. And of course, Alex in the back channel, as always, giving us some expert info on the Falcon 9 and Falcon Heavy rockets. So it's been a very fun live stream here discussing a lot of interesting things here in the spaceflight community. Also would like to thank our members, our flight directors, and our launch directors. Thank you to the both tiers there. That's a lot of people, and it's so incredible to see all of that support here coming out to help us do what we do. I mean, it's said way too often, but I think it still really holds true. We could not do what we're doing here without these two groups of people here, and without everyone for not only showing up, but joining the membership program and super chatting and sharing with your friends and hitting the like button. So thank you to everyone here, especially on screen, for a tremendous amount of support here. But yeah, thank you everyone for tuning into NSF Live today. We had a lot of great questions, and we're going to be throwing you over here in just a few seconds to this new Hubble video that is being premiered right at the end of the show here. You see it's loading. YouTube is...
Make really sure to watch this. It's all about, like, also example, like Jared Isaacman and his plans for Hubble, and like I feel like that's a very important part here, the potential of the Polaris program, maybe also changing the trajectory of Hubble quite literally. Yeah, good.
I also have to point out we'll also be releasing an article alongside this. If you go to NASASpaceflight.com, shortly we'll have an article also discussing this historic anniversary.
Yeah, and Jared Isaacman, someone we actually recently had on NSF Live. I think it was about 2 weeks ago or so. We had Jared Isaacman on discussing the Polaris program, Inspiration 4, and what he hopes or plans to do with Polaris 2 if they do get the approval and the funding, not funding, but the time and the availability to go up to Hubble and do some work on there. So hopefully we'll see what happens there with Polaris 2. I mean, as someone with literally a Hubble poster right in front of me, I hope to see some Hubble servicing missions happen in the rest of this decade. But that's going to bring us to the end of our show here. Thank you so much for watching. We will see you next week, and we hope that you enjoy our video on saving Hubble 30 years since STS-61. Have a great week, everyone. We'll see you next Sunday.
And here we go. We have liftoff.
Propulsion continues to be normal.
R68 chamber pressure looks good.
Traveling up. Roger, with Planet
Décollage.
Put that in the big bag, Eagle.
343 unfolds to go.
Indeed. We rise together back to the moon and beyond.
This methane will be igniting in the flare, correct?
Yikes. You bet. We don't need any more of these.